Hello everyone and welcome to Guild Wars 2 Daily. Today we're going to be talking about lore, and the footage in the background comes in from me. Yeah, me from the beta, which is now sadly over. As I played through, I did tell you guys that I was hoping to get a lot of coverage from Guild Wars 2. I didn't get as much as I wanted, nowhere near as much, but I do have about 6 hours worth of stuff. Not 100% sure what I'm going to do with all of that. Honestly, I would have liked a bit more because I don't think all of that 6 hours of footage is amazing. But I played the beta in total across all characters about 31 hours, and I was always on the lookout for stuff to record during that time. It's just a lot of the time I felt like it was stuff we've kind of already seen in early game things, so that 6 hours I've got hopefully is pretty good stuff. All of it is on the same character. I know I asked for 3 different characters, but in the end I only played the Char Warrior. I was hoping to go with like a different character for each area, but I just took that same Char through all the different places because I didn't want to have to deal with leveling up on the different professions. So I did get a range of different weapons and stuff, so I'm sorry if you were looking for something other than Warrior, but hey, there are other betas coming up, so hopefully we're alright there. But yeah, the footage right now is me in the Diasa Plateau, and you're going to be seeing me going around what was an outpost in Guild Wars 1 called the Greenwich Courthouse, and there in Guild Wars 2 it turns out there's actually like a secret tunnel that goes underneath there, under the water, and it's just really cool there. So that was one kind of part that stood out, so I thought, hey, I'll use that for daily today. So that's what you'll be seeing in the background, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the beta yourselves. Let's get started. Like I say, it is going to be lore. I've got 2 questions today, and then a whole other load of stuff I want to talk about at the end of the video about Guild Wars 2 Daily and what we'll probably be doing moving on. So anyway, the first question was asked by No More Usernames 73294, who said, in a previous video you said that the mists allow players to travel to distant places and times, and that many competitive PvP maps are actually famous historical battles the player can participate in. How can the Sylvari take place in a battle that was probably thousands of years before they existed? Why would the humans and Char be allied in these historical battles, as they often are in PvP, if they only just recently stopped warring? How come no one in the time period thought it strange to see these races? Now, I don't think this is specifically a case that you've moved back in time. Now, the mists do allow travel through time in the Guild Wars universe. You can travel through time in this way. In the centre of the mists is a place called the Rift, and if you go in that, you can pretty much get to any space and any time possible, and you can kind of move around. And we've heard about that. However, the mists themselves aren't actually allowing you, when you're in PvP, to go back to these historical battles. I think the idea is more that they are mimicking the historical battles. Now, the mists have always been a really weird thing that's been kind of hard to explain. In fact, on my channel, every time they've come up, I've always mentioned how hard I find it to explain them. However, there is a quote that came from one of the developers quite recently during the development of Guild Wars 2 from, I believe it was Jeff Grubb who said this, and he kind of explained the mists in a new way to us that does account for what we're seeing in the PvP era. So here's exactly what he said. He said, the mists is the realm of the afterlife and the proto-reality that exists between the worlds, which in turn are the building blocks of reality. So the first thing really to take from that is, in the mist there are lots of different afterlives. There's not just one afterlife. Like the underworld is where you would first go, and then they decide what afterlife you go to past that. So we've heard that each of the gods have got their own afterlife, depending on how you lived your life as a mortal. And then we've also heard of this other place, the Hall of Heroes, as the humans call it, which is an afterlife for essentially the bravest and the greatest of souls. Like Prince Rurik ended up going there himself when he died, and it seems like lots of, not just the humans, but the Norn also seem to believe in a version of the Hall of Heroes, and so do lots of different races, so that's also another reasonable afterlife. We've heard of the Tengu having their own afterlife called the Sky Above the Sky, which some people think could be the same as Dwayna's afterlife. It's just that the Tengu call it something different. So there are all these different afterlives that exist within the mist, right? So this is one kind of thing that's in the mists. Jeff Grubb goes on and he says, they are the home to the various gods and other powerful entities and the residences of various afterlives. So there's actually something quite cool there as well, where he references other powerful entities. What are these that aren't quite gods but also have homes in the mist? What are these things? I mean, Elder Dragons, are they kind of similar? Is Tyria just a realm of the Elder Dragons, perhaps? Anyway, he goes on and he says, this is the bit that really you want to pay attention to. He says, the mists resonate from the worlds around them, forming bits of their own reality. These are islands of existence that reflect the histories of their worlds. Now, this quote came from Jeff Grubb during the development of Guild Wars 2, and I suppose when he said this to us, they already had in mind their plans for PvP. So this explains what's going on. When you're in the Battle of Kylo, you're not actually participating in the Guild Wars when they happened way back when. It's just that this was a particularly turbulent, shall we say, period in Tyrion's history, and the mists are like resonating from that and replicating that in some way. So you can go to a physical place in the universe that is essentially mimicking this dramatic event in Tyrion history. So that is kind of what's going on. So you are, in a sense, participating in the Guild Wars because everything in that area is 100% authentic and it's just as the Guild Wars were. But it's not the actual event in history, and this is why it can change slightly. This is why now you can have Asura and Sylvari running around fighting there, but that's not going to change the timeline or anything like that because you've not actually gone back in time. You're in the same time period, I suppose. You're just in a different area that's mimicking what that looks like. So it's kind of confusing, but I like it because it does work out in the lore. It does make sense, and it's a really good excuse for us to be able to go back and see some of this awesome stuff. I didn't play any PvP in the beta, and I kind of regret that a little bit. I still don't know what that other map is in lore. I don't know where that is supposed to be taking place. So don't forget also that in theory, I guess the mist could replicate in our time zone stuff that hasn't happened yet in Tyria. So you could be forward in time too. Though I don't believe we've seen anything like that just yet. But I do know that there's a lot of scope for the PvP maps to really show us some very cool stuff that makes us feel like we're taking place in events from the past. So that's quite cool, and I like that so much is going on in the Mist. Obviously, another question is the Eternal Battlegrounds and everything that World vs. World takes place in. Is that another realm of the Mist? I mean, that's very curious because in the beta we could see lots of characters around the Asura Gates called Mist Warriors, and they never really described the lore behind World vs. World. They just said that there's an eternal battle going on. There's so many questions like, why is it all the races from Tyria that are taking place in this battle? What about the other worlds that exist in the universe? What's going on? What is the story behind this World versus World thing? And from what I could see, they really didn't explain that much. Maybe in World versus World there was some small tidbits of lore, but I certainly didn't find any. So it is interesting to see how the Mists are reacting to various things and all the different kind of stuff that could be going on in the Mists right now. Because in some ways in Guild Wars 2 we have less access to the Mists. In Guild Wars 1 we could go to some of the realms of these gods. We could go to 3 of them, so we had some access there. But in Guild Wars 1 that's been taken away, and now all we really have are the Heart of the Mists and the Eternal Battlegrounds, World versus World and competitive PvP to go forward on. So I'm interested in how the lore really works out there for the Mists come Guild Wars 2. But that does answer your question. You're not actually going back in time, you're just going to an area that is replicating something that happened in the past. The second question was asked by I Play Guild Wars, who says, if Jormag whispered and corrupted Jorah's brother, in what language did it speak? As I recall, Elder Dragons do not talk any language the other species understand, or anything we can really recognise as a language at all. It seems like they just don't really communicate. It's like saying that a hurricane can communicate or a tidal wave can communicate. They're really much more similar to these natural disasters than any kind of intelligent being. So communication with them certainly seems very odd. However, obviously we've seen that champions, Glint in particular, could communicate, and it seems like the other champions in Guild Wars 2 time can communicate as well, because they're obviously organising all the forces of their respective Elder Dragons. So there is some kind of communication going on, and this here about Jormag whispering and corrupting Jorah's brother is an interesting topic, because you'll remember in a recent lore episode I was talking about how Drakkar Lake, that thing under Drakkar Lake, wasn't actually Jormag, it was just one of his champions. Well, there's been some news on that, that's why I've picked this question. So before I established that under this lake there was this giant thing, and we had heard that it wasn't actually Jormag at all, it was this thing called Drakkar, or that's a fan name we'd given it because it was Drakkar Lake and there was this beast underneath it. And this champion, as we knew it, was the thing that had actually communicated with Jorah's brother Svanir. So we do know that communication can happen from the Elder Dragon champion, so this would have fit, right? Because Drakkar would have whispered these evil things, this ritual, whatever it was, this corrupted magic into Svanir and turned him into the Nornbear, and then that does make sense. But in the beta, actually in Holbrak, in essentially the middle of Holbrak, you could speak to a Norn who would give you a little bit of history about the area, and he had some really interesting dialogue where he pretty much said that Jormag rose from beneath Drakkar Lake. So he there directly contradicted what we understood before that by saying that the dragon actually came up from under this lake. Now, I suppose it's still possible that the beast we saw was just really high up in the lake and Jormag was way deeper down in the lake, but I find that a bit hard to swallow. So now it seems like that thing we were seeing in Guild Wars 1 actually was Jormag, which now throws what you're asking into question again. If that was Jormag that then whispered and corrupted Svanir, Jorah's brother, how the hell did he do that? Because he's an Elder Dragon. Well, I suppose in that case, I'd say that this idea of him whispering these words of corruption or whatever, this could be more of a metaphorical thing. It could be just that the magic of this Elder Dragon seeped into him and corrupted the area. That's certainly not a new concept to us. When we heard about the Central Transfer Chamber, which was the hub of Asura Gates for the Asura in Guild Wars 1's time, we heard that the reason why the Asura built this chamber with all the Asura Gates there was because it was a particularly potent area for magic. There was magic bleeding out of the rocks around there, as the Asura described it, and it seemed like a very convenient place to power all of their gates because there was magic seeping through the earth. Later we found out that the magic was seeping through the earth there because an Elder Dragon was asleep right next to there, the Prime Orders. That's where he was sleeping. So the same thing could have happened up at the lake, where this is simply how Svanir was corrupted. But it also certainly seems like Svanir was chosen on purpose, while other Norn weren't. But then there's also lore that the Norn always tried to avoid the lake because they appreciated it was corrupt in some way. So maybe we can put it down to that. What I find most interesting, though, is what this Norn says. And it said in the beta about how Jormag actually was the thing under that lake. And that's thrown everything into question now. And I'm wondering what the actual deal is. The thing with Guild Wars 2 is it's not like Guild Wars 1 where you'd have a specific quest or a specific area that would deal with certain parts of lore. Now, if you want to find out lore, and this is something that's really hit me kind of hard in the beta, you have to speak to pretty much every NPC, and a lot of them have no dialogue for you. And a lot of the event NPCs and Renown Quest NPCs don't actually say anything about lore. They just give you a crappy reason to go and kill a certain amount of enemies or clear up a certain area or do a specific monotonous task over. And the actual lore we're getting from these NPCs is far more sparse and spread out, which has meant, actually, this is one of the reasons why when I was taking beta footage, I found it quite hard to have the same kind of focus I have for Guild Wars 1 and for lore, because you can't just do one video where you go and speak to a bunch of NPCs that are next to each other that explain some fascinating thing. Rather, you'll have one NPC that you speak to in a random location and they'll say something interesting, and then that would be like a 10-second video, and then you have to go miles away and actually figure out where something else cool was. For example, in Holbrak also, you can speak to a Jotun, and I'll save this for another episode because I could talk about this for a long time, but there's a Jotun there who gives his version of Tyria's history and his own accounting as a Jotun, as one of these ancient races, as what it was like when the humans came. And he says certain things that match up with what we understand before, namely the fact that humanity came from the south, it sailed from Cantha, the southern continent, up into Tyria, and that is something we already knew. And this Jotun will say the same thing to you. He says, oh yeah, the humans came up from the south, which is cool. But then he says other stuff that completely throws into doubt things we'd learned before. Like, he mentions how the human gods actually gave Jotun magic before anyone else, and all this other fascinating stuff. But I can talk about that later. There's all kinds of little things that I've learned in the beta. For example, another one that was pretty cool was you could speak to a certain Char, and he mentioned how there were Char cubs starving in Cantha, and we'd never really heard about any Char being in Cantha up until that point. It was really cool to be able to just read that one bit of dialogue. But unfortunately, it's very different in Guild Wars 2 trying to get all this lore together, and certainly some stuff isn't matching up at this point. It's not, and this thing with Drakkar, or now maybe Jormag, under the lake is just one example of many of these things. So my experience of beta, to kind of segue that out of the questions now into the end bit, my experience of beta was generally really positive. I've got a lot of things to say about various different aspects of it though, which I think I might now start doing in Guild Wars 2 daily. So I'm really enjoying the lore episodes. As you know, so far we've been doing a mechanic episode and then a lore episode on the day off, right? Well, I definitely think the lore episodes are going quite well, and I think I still have a lot to offer there. But now that we've all actually played the beta, a lot of these mechanic questions that I was getting, I think a lot of us kind of know already for ourselves because we have first-hand experience. So I'm really not sure how much I have to offer on that mechanical standpoint. I don't think... Well, we'll see how the questions go. If you still have mechanical questions, please feel free to ask me, but we'll see how it goes, because I feel like now I really don't have as much to offer people because they've actually played the game, right? So instead of that, what I'm thinking thinking is on the every other day, maybe I'll still answer one mechanics question, but then maybe I'll catch us all up on news, things that ArenaNet have been talking about, certain interviews that have come out, things that we might have learned from there, cool videos that I might have found maybe. But then also on top of that, I'd like those other days to go into my personal impressions on various systems that are in the game. Like, I've got a lot to say about the Renown system, those hearts, filling them up, and how really there seems to be a disconnect there between completing those and feeling like you've finished an area of the game. However, you might not have seen some of the most awesome dynamic events that are going on, but people are going to feel finished and leave. I've got a lot of thoughts on a lot of things about the game, and maybe that's what we could do on the every other day. So yeah, do let me know what you think about that, guys. But lore, definitely please feel free to keep asking any lore questions you might have. Footage in the background will probably be from me for the Guild Wars 2 Daily in the foreseeable future. However, I would still like to use footage from other people, because some other people will have found stuff that I didn't in the beta. Like I said, I've only got 6 hours of stuff, and there will have been some cool hidden stuff. Like, one of the most popular videos that first came out was this guy that found this amazing hidden garden in the Chartlands. I'm sure there's loads of things like that. So if I find cool videos from people that have given me permission to use it, I won't hesitate to show you guys the best stuff that I possibly can in the footage in the background. And aside from Guild Wars 2 Daily, I would like to do a couple of episodes with my own commentary of me playing through the game. For example, I had so much fun in the Diasa Plains. I really did. I had so much fun there. There were so many cool events with cows and stuff, and I kind of want to do a video about that. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on with the channel. Let me know what you think, guys, as ever. And thanks very much for watching. I guess I'll see you tomorrow. See you later, everyone.